Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my channel right here on YouTube, Shirley TV. Right here on this channel, I will be, you know, providing content related to business, law, accounting, and I have another channel here on YouTube, Shirley, I think it's Shirley Business TV, right here on YouTube, where I will have business content, accounting, law. So on this channel, Shirley TV, yeah, like I said, business content, marketing, advertising, promoting, anything business related. I'll be going over lawsuits, contracts. So that is related to business. So contracts, civil law, criminal law, content, anything related to business, international business, global business, current business events in the news. But today I am, excuse me, today I want to go over this complaint, this lawsuit, Jane Doe versus Sean Combs, Harve Pierre, the third assailant, Daddy's House Recordings Incorporated, and Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated. So just wanted to get inside this contract, this complaint, this lawsuit, to see what it entails. So let's get this ball rolling. So this is a lawsuit, it's a complaint, it's a civil case, so it comes under civil law, not criminal law. So civil law, when it comes under civil law, the plaintiff will be suing for money damages. But when it comes to criminal law, then, lockups are the most intended target. Yes, so let me get the ball rolling. So we have the United States District Court, Southern District of New York, Jane Doe, plaintiff. Jane Doe is the plaintiff. So Jane Doe means there is no name given at this time, but Jane Doe is a real person. So Jane Doe, the plaintiff, versus Sean Combs, Harve Pierre, the third assailant, Daddy's House Recordings Incorporated, and Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated. So in other words, the defendants are the individual persons and their businesses. So Sean Combs and Harve Pierre, those are individual people. And then the third assailants are the businesses. Daddy's House Recordings Incorporated and Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated. So in other words, the lawsuit comes against Sean Combs, Harve Pierre, and their businesses. So let me see what's in the contents of this. So as I said, this is a civil case, civil case number complaint, jury trial demanded. And trigger warning, this document contains highly graphic information of a sexual nature, including sexual assault. So, you should, children should not be reading this. So if you have any young children, young adults, young children, in the room, don't advise not to read this while you are in the presence of your young children. So let's get this thing rolling. So it says plaintiff, the plaintiff Jane Doe, Ms. Doe hereby alleges. So all these in this lawsuit are all allegations. All these things are allegations. So Miss Jane Doe hereby alleges as follows. Preliminary statement. On November the 16th, 2023, Cassandra Ventura, aka Cassie, filed a 35-page lawsuit in which she exposed Sean Combs for subjecting her to nearly a decade of physical and emotional abuse, punctuated by trafficking and being forced to engage in drug-fueled non-consensual encounters with other men. Ordinarily, when a lawsuit such as Ms. Ventura's is filed that involves events that took place long ago, witnesses are few and far between and evidence hard to muster. That means evidence usually in these type of lawsuits are hard to, in other words, hard to prove because it's been such a long time, 15, 20 years, maybe something like that. No, not so far the claims brought against Mr. Combs. Within minutes of the filing, salient facts of Ms. Ventura's claims were confirmed by various witnesses, including a rival musician whose car Mr. Combs blew up, allegedly, as well as various individuals who observed Mr. Combs beat Ms. Ventura. So they're just highlighting the incidents from a previous lawsuit that was brought against Mr. Sean Diddy Combs. So in other words, they're highlighting those incidents in that lawsuit. Only a few days later, 2 other lawsuits were filed against Mr. Combs. In one plaintiff, Joey Dickerson, Neal, alleged that Mr. Combs drugged and assaulted her when she was a college student. The other lawsuit accused Miss Combs. It said Miss Combs and singer Aaron Hall of force, so it should be Mr. Combs. The other lawsuit accused Mr. Combs and singer Aaron Hall of forcing the plaintiff and another unidentified woman into another act. At the same time, I would be skipping some of those heinous words, so just know that I will be skipping some of those words. I mean, just reading over it. So you might hear me say blank, 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 or just reading right past it. So at the same time, a 4th lawsuit was filed. So the 4 lawsuits so far. This is just the second one. I think this is the 3rd one that I am presenting. At the same time, a 4th lawsuit was filed. This one against Mr. Combs Companies and defendants Harve, Pierre, the longtime president of Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated. Bad Boy. The suit alleged that Mr. Pierre used his position of power at Bad Boy Bad Boy Entertainment, I guess, to groom and assault his former assistant, and that Bad Boy looked the other way at the time. So Bad Boy looked the other way when, in other words, you see a crime happening, and it's a crime to see a crime happening and don't report it. You see a crime happening, you're supposed to report it. It says, this is now the 5th lawsuit filed against Mr. Combs in the last 3 weeks. Incredibly, the allegations brought by Ms. Doe are in many ways even more egregious than those brought by his prior victims. Specifically in 2003, when she was only 17 years old and in the 11th grade, Ms. Doe was, and by Mr. Combs, Pierre, and the 3rd assailant. In short, when she was just a teenager, Ms. Doe met Mr. Pierre and the 3rd assailant in a lounge in the Detroit, Michigan area. While at the lounge, Mr. Pierre insisted that he was best friends with Mr. Combs and even called Mr. Combs with Ms. Doe. So in other words, he called Mr. Combs while he was in the presence of Ms. Doe to give her the impression. So this is Mr. Pierre. Mr. Pierre, he called Mr. Combs in the presence of Ms. Doe to give Ms. Doe an indication that he was so well known with Mr. Puppy Combs. But sometimes when you're young, a lot of times, this is just my opinion, as a young lady coming up myself, I was, we all were once young, and sometimes you can be easily persuaded because you're young, and that's where they try to get you. They try to get you, knowing that you're young, trying to persuade you and say, oh yeah, I know your mother, or I know your cousin, They always tell you don't talk to strangers. That's what I always learned when I was coming up as a young girl. Don't talk to strangers. You're outside playing in front of your home, or you're going to school, on the way from school, don't talk to strangers. Just keep it moving and go where you gotta go. Don't get into no strangers' cars, none of that. So I learned that at a young age. Mr. Combs convinced Miss Doe, who was half his age at the time, to accompany Mr. Pierre and the third assailant on a private jet to come to his studio in New York City. So as I said previously, these are all allegations. These are alleged incidents. Alleged incidents. Before they left for the private jet, Mr. Pierre, he smoked in a bathroom at the lounge, in which he also assaulted Miss Doe by forcing her to. So some of the words, like I said, I will skip. Let me see. I skipped this whole. Okay, so the third assailant is a pseudonym. When the name of the third assailant is revealed during discovery, plaintiff will seek to amend the complaint to replace the pseudonym. So let's read on down to page 3. Page 3. Mr. Pierre, third assailant, and another gentleman then escorted the high schooler to a private jet, which flew them to Teterboro, New Jersey. There were SUVs awaiting the group at Teterboro, and the 4 of them were driven to Daddy's House Recording Studio, a studio famously owned and operated by Mr. Combs and Bad Boy. So I'm wondering, was she going to, did she think that she was going to record a song or be involved in some type of musical venture, or, in the studio? So I'm trying to read on to find out what does the contents entail? What was the objective of them interacting with her? It says, while at the studio, Mr. Combs and his associates, including Mr. Pierre, supplied Miss Doe with, but they have a lot of misspellings in this. But other than that, it's a pretty well put together lawsuit. So in other words, they gave her some, and they gave her some alcohol. As the night wore on, the 17-year-old Miss Doe became more and more inebriated, eventually to the point that she could not possibly have consented with anyone, much less someone twice her age. That's true. Incoherent. It's just like I guess it's on the lines of if you have a mentally unstable person, and then somebody's under the influence, intoxicated of drugs, alcohol, somebody mentally ill, they don't have the mental capacity to consent to anything. So while Mr. Combs was Miss Doe, he complained that he could not unless she pinched his as hard as she could. Mr. Combs then watched on as third assailant, who Miss Doe had not even realized had begun to have, as she told him to stop. After third assailant was finished, Mr. Pierre took his turn at Miss Doe and then violently forced her to give him, during which Miss Doe was struggling to breathe. When Mr. Pierre finished, he left Miss Doe in the bathroom alone. Miss Doe fell into the fetal position and lay on the floor. Her was in pain. So her body was in pain when they finished the encounters with her. So all of these are alleged incidents. Finally, after a period of time, Miss Doe regained her bearings. However, she could barely stand up following the gang and had to be helped to walk out of the building and back into a car. She was taken back to an airport and flown back to Michigan. However, she has very limited recollection of her transport home and only remembers being in her car sometime early in the morning. So this is one of the pictures of, I guess this is Sean Puppy Combs and someone someone sitting on his lap. Unlike many victims who have come forward after decades, Ms. Doe can prove that she not only met Mr. Combs on the night in question, but was in his studio in New York City with him on that night. Remember when viewing these, Ms. Doe was 17 years old. Unlike many victims who have come forward after decades, right, see, many victims have come forward after decades, and they probably didn't really have no tangible proof, only no tangible proof. So in the United States, you're innocent until proven guilty. So that's what she said right here. Like many victims who have come forward after decades, Ms. Doe can prove that she not only met Mr. Combs on the night of question, but was in his studio. Right, was in his studio, because there's the picture. There's the picture. Here are the pictures. So a lot of times people will wonder why you always taking pictures. Oh, you take pictures, you take videos, you taking pictures wherever you go. Sometimes memories, and sometimes you never know what you may need down the line. Ms. Doe has lived with her memories of this fateful night for 20 years, during which time she has suffered extreme emotional distress that has impacted nearly every aspect of her life, I assume, of her life and personal relationships. So I'm on page 5, personal relationships. So 20 years, so she must be around 27 right now. Given the brave women who have come forward against Ms. Combs and Mr. Pierre in recent weeks, Ms. Doe is doing the same. To that end, Ms. Doe brings this action seeking injunctive, declaratory, and monetary relief against defendants in violation of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law, Gender Motivated Violence Act, New York City Administration Code. I guess that's administrative or administration. So not familiar with the codes, the abbreviations. Jurisdiction and venue. The court has jurisdiction over this matter pursuant to 28 U.S.C. As this action involves citizens of different states, and the amount in controversy in this matter exceeds 75,000. So exceeds 75,000. So the court has supplemental jurisdiction over plaintiffs' related claims arising under state and city law pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 1367, number 11, pursuant to the venue is proper in this court because a substantial part of the events or omissions giving rise to this action, including the unlawful employment practices and intentional and negligent torturous conduct alleged herein occurred in this district. Yeah, torturous because it comes under tort law, so I assume this would be assault and battery, an assault and battery lawsuit where she can sue for money damages, because this comes under also civil law. So this is not a criminal. This is not criminal. Well, I mean, some of the allegations sound criminal, but this is a civil lawsuit. So civil lawsuits, the plaintiff can recover money damages if I guess at the end of the case, if it goes to trial, or if it's settled. So the plaintiff can recover money damages. So we have the parties. Plaintiff Jane Doe is a citizen of Canada. Defendant Sean Combs is a citizen of the state of California. Defendant Harve Pierre is a citizen of the state of New York. Defendant, the third assailant, is, upon information and belief, a citizen of the state of New York. Defendant Daddy's House Recordings Incorporated. Daddy's House is a music, media, and entertainment company founded and owned by defendant Sean Combs. So Daddy's House is owned by Mr. Sean Combs. Daddy's House is let me go back. Daddy's House is incorporated and headquartered in New York. During the relevant time period, Daddy's House and or Sean Combs owned and operated the Daddy's House recording studio, wherein Miss Doe was by Mr. Combs, Mr. Pierre, and third assailant. So it said during the relevant time period, Daddy's House and or Sean Combs owned and operated Daddy's House recording studio wherein where Miss Doe was. So in other words, the alleged incident took place in Daddy's House recording studio, which is owned by Mr. Sean Puppy Combs. So that's where the alleged incident took place. So defendant Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated is a music media and entertainment company founded and owned by defendant Sean Combs. Bad Boy is incorporated and headquartered in New York, New York. During the relevant time period, Bad Boy and or Sean Combs owned and operated the Daddy's House recording studio wherein Miss Doe was, by Mr. Combs, Mr. Pierre, and the third assailant. So it happened, the alleged incident, the alleged assault and battery took place in the Daddy's House recording studio owned and operated by Mr. Sean Combs, Sean Puppy Combs. So let's go down to, we're on page 6. Let's get down to the factual allegations. In 2003, Miss Doe was a 17-year-old. In 2003, Miss Doe was a 17-year-old 11th grader. Residing in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. So in 2003, she was 17. 20 years later, so we look at 37 right there. I had said 27 earlier, but she should be 37. I had said 27 earlier, but it should be 37. 37, because 20 years plus 17 is 37. So she was 17 when this alleged incident happened. And she was in high school in Detroit, Michigan. And she was an 11th grader. At the time, Mr. Combs was 34 years old, twice the age of Ms. Doe, and one of the most well-known and influential music artists of all time. A decade earlier, Mr. Combs founded Bad Boy and installed his lifetime friend, Mr. Pierre, into the role of president. So that's something, you're running a company and you bring your longtime friend aboard, Mr. Pierre, in the role of president of his company, of his Bad Boy company. At the time, Mr. Combs had many connections to Michigan, including, among others, to the Black Mafia family, a money laundering organization that is rumored to have seeded Bad Boy. Accordingly, upon information and belief, Mr. Combs' associates, including Mr. Pierre and the third assailant, spent significant time in and around Detroit, Michigan. So all these alleged, allegations, these are all allegations. You are innocent until proven guilty in the United States of America. On one evening between the spring and fall 2003, Miss Doe was out with friends. It was not uncommon for her and her friends to frequent bars and lounges in the Detroit area. Certain of Miss Doe's friends were well connected with people in the music industry. So we're on page 7. On the evening in question, Miss Doe was with friends in the lounge when she was approached by who she later learned was Mr. Pierre. Mr. Pierre was with his own friends, including the third assailant. Mr. Pierre, the third assailant, and their friends were dressed in suits. Mr. Pierre repeatedly complimented Miss Doe's appearance, saying that she was hot, among other things. He then began talking about his self-described best friend and brother, Mr. Combs. Right, so in other words, talking to Miss Doe, Miss Jane Doe, about Mr. Combs, letting her know that he knew Mr. Combs and he was a very good friend of Mr. Combs, just to strike up conversation with her, all in all, but, specifically Mr. Pierre continually stated that Mr. Combs would love to meet Miss Doe. Mr. Pierre even called Mr. Combs and put Miss Doe on the line. Mr. Combs told Miss Doe that he would love to meet her and that she should accompany Mr. Pierre to New York City in a private jet. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Pierre directed Miss Doe to go with him into the bathroom at the lounge. Once inside the bathroom, Mr. Pierre began to, and from what appeared to be an aluminum can. So he went in the bathroom, allegedly to smoke from aluminum can. After he finished smoking, Mr. Pierre suddenly took out his demanded that Miss and forced Miss head down to perform on him. After assaulting Miss Doe, after allegedly assaulting Miss Doe, so all these are allegations in this lawsuit, but so after assaulting Miss Doe, Mr. Pierre directed her to accompany him, the third assailant and third member of their group, to an airport in Pontiac, Michigan, where signature a fixed base operator had prepared a private jet to take the four of them to New York City. Okay, page 8. So this is a 14-page lawsuit, 14-page complaint lawsuit. Number 30, item number 30. Upon information and belief, the private jet landed at Teterboro Airport. Upon departing the jet, 2 black SUVs were awaiting the group. 31, Ms. Doe got into an SUV with Mr. Pierre and the third assailant, and the other member of the group went in the second SUV. The SUVs brought the group to Daddy's house recording studio, a recording studio and hangout owned and operated by Mr. Combs and Bad Boy. So Daddy's house recording studio owned by Mr. Puffy Combs, Mr. Sean Puffy Combs. So that's where they ended up. When Miss Doe arrived, she was escorted into the building where she distinctly remembers seeing the sign for the company, Technicolor. Upon entering the studio, Miss Doe first encountered Mr. Combs. At the time she arrived, a female recording artist was using the studio as Mr. Combs and her parents watched on. She finished up shortly after Miss Doe arrived and left. While still in the studio section of Daddy's house, Mr. Combs asked Miss Doe to sit on his lap to take a picture. A copy of the photograph is below. Mr. Combs, Mr. Pierre, and the third assailant began to ply Miss Doe, a 17-year-old child at the time, with copious amounts of drugs and alcohol. So page number 9. While the evening became a blur, Miss Doe does recall Mr. Combs, Mr. Pierre, and the third assailant hitting on her incessantly, stroking her body, asking to see her, and telling her how and she was. Various other pictures were taken in the studio that night, leaving no doubt that Miss Doe was in Mr. Combs' New York City studio with Mr. Combs on the night she was assaulted. As the night wore on, the 17-year-old Miss Doe became more and more inebriated, eventually to the point that she could not possibly have consented to having with anyone, much less someone twice her age. Number 40, item 40. Nevertheless, that evening, Mr. Combs directed Miss Doe to accompany him to the bathroom at the studio. Once there, Mr. Combs removed Miss Doe's skirt and her from with his while she hung over the sink. It says, once there, Mr. Combs removed her skirt and then, so that is the alleged sexual assault. Miss Doe did not consent to any type of act with Mr. Combs, but he continued thrusting. At some point, Mr. Combs turned turned Miss Doe around to face him. He told her that he could not, and asked her to hard as she could to help him get blank. He then turned her back around and continued. By this point, Miss Doe was coming in and out of consciousness because of the drugs and alcohol she had been given by defendants. Her next memory was looking up into the mirror above the sink to find that the third assailant had replaced Mr. Combs and was her from behind. Mr. Combs was watching the third assailant assault Miss Doe from a chair outside of the bathroom. So the alleged assault, in other words, one defendant was assaulting Miss Doe, and then when he finished, the other defendant watched as the other one, Sean Puppy Combs. And so we have Mr. Pierre, and Mr. Combs. So after the third assailant was finished, he was replaced by Mr. Pierre, who began by having non-consensual with Miss Doe before violently forcing her to give him. During the latter part of the assault, Mr. Pierre forced his into Miss without her consent. Miss Doe remembers that Mr. Pierre was sweaty and that she had difficulty breathing. So when Mr. Pierre finished, he left Miss Doe in the bathroom alone. Miss Doe fell into the fetal position. Okay, so I think I read over this. She fell into the fetal position and lay on the floor. Okay, finally, after a period of time, Miss Doe regained her bearings. However, she could barely stand up following the assault. And so as a result of being assaulted by Mr. Combs and Mr. Pierre, the third assailant, Miss Doe suffered significant emotional distress and feelings of shame that have plagued her life and personal relationships for 20 years. Ms. Doe knew that speaking out against defendants would be extremely difficult and that she would likely be subjected to retaliation and defamatory slurs and attacks. Right. However, in November 2023, which was last month, Ms. Doe read about a lawsuit filed against Mr. Combs by Cassandra Ventura, aka Cassie. Ms. Ventura's suit described a decade of physical and mental abuse. Most triggering for Ms. Doe was reading about Ms. Ventura's allegations of trafficking and being forced to have with other men against her will. Ms. Doe obviously understands that she too had been, trafficked, and that go ahead and take a little sip. Excuse me. So in other words, Ms. Doe, she heard about the other lawsuit from Miss Cassie Ventura, and Cassie Ventura versus Sean Puppy Combs. So she heard about that, and she, I guess she had knowledge of all the hateful things that were said in that lawsuit. So says Ms. Doe obviously understands that she too had been, and Mr. Combs' behavior in forcing women into non-consensual was not an isolated incident or unique only to Ms. Ventura. So in other words, she's alleging that she suffered the same heinous acts, the same hateful acts at the hands of Mr. Sean Puppy Combs that Miss Cassandra Ventura faced. So she suffered the same heinous acts. So these are all alleged, these are all allegations. So innocent until proven guilty in the United States of America. Then just days later, Miss Doe read about a case filed against Mr. Pierre. So in other words, Mr. Pierre had cases filed against him. He had a case filed against him. I don't know if it's one or it could have been more. The suit alleged that Mr. Pierre used his position of power as bad boy to groom and assault his former assistant. Seeing two other women bravely speak out against Mr. Combs and Mr. Pierre, respectively, gave Ms. Doe the confidence to tell her story as well. As such, she files this lawsuit. So, in other words, this is the wording is coming from her lawyer. The wording is coming from her lawyer. So, in other words, when he put it like that, seeing two other women bravely speak out against Mr. Combs and Mr. Pierre, respectively, gave Ms. Doe the confidence and the courage to tell her story as well. So it gave her the confidence to tell her story. So let's move to let's look at the first first cause of action, page 11. The first cause of action is violation of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law in New York City against all defendants. So the violation of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law against all defendants. Plaintiff repeats and alleges each and every allegation in all of the preceding paragraphs as if fully set forth herein. The above described conduct of defendant Mr. Combs, including but not limited to Mr. Combs' assault of plaintiff in New York City, constitutes a crime of violence against plaintiff and is a crime of violence motivated by gender. Motivated by gender as defined in a certain code of law. The term crime of violence means an act or a series of acts that, multiple acts that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against a person as defined in state or federal law, or that would constitute so in other words, they're saying that, the allegations in this lawsuit, could constitute a misdemeanor or a felony against a person as defined in state or federal law, or that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against property as defined in state or federal law if the conduct presents a serious risk of physical injury to another, whether or not those acts have actually resulted in criminal charges, prosecution, or conviction. And the term crime of violence motivated by gender means a crime of violence committed because of gender or on the basis of gender, and due at least in part to an animus based on the victim's gender. Item 54, the above described conduct, this is page 12. The above described conduct of defendant Mr. Pierre, including but not limited to Mr. Pierre's assault of plaintiff in New York City, constitutes a crime of violence against plaintiff and is a crime of violence motivated by gender as defined in the code. It says 10-1103. The term crime of violence means an act or series of acts. An act or a series of acts. So there could be an act or multiple acts, so a series of acts that will constitute a misdemeanor. So in other words, these acts could turn out to be a misdemeanor, or they could be a felony. Misdemeanor or felony against a person as defined in state or federal law, or that will constitute a misdemeanor or felony against property as defined in state or federal law if the conduct presents a serious risk of physical injury to another, whether or not those acts have actually resulted in criminal charges, prosecution, or conviction. And the term crime of violence motivated by gender means a crime of violence committed because of gender or on the basis of gender, and due at least in part to an animus based on the victim, on the victim's gender. Item number 55, the above described conduct of defendant, the third assailant, including but not limited to. The third assailant, sexual assault. Oh, so sexual assault of plaintiff in New York City constitutes a crime of violence against plaintiff and is a crime of violence motivated by gender as defined in 10-1103. The term crime of violence means an act or series of acts that will constitute a misdemeanor or felony against a person as defined in state or federal law, or that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against property as defined in state or federal law if the conduct presents a serious risk of physical injury to another, whether or not those acts have actually resulted in criminal charges, prosecution, or conviction. So in other words, it's saying that, let me start from the beginning. It said the term crime of violence means an act or series of acts that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against a person as defined in state or federal, or that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against property as defined in state or federal law if the conduct presents a serious risk of physical injury to another, whether or not those acts have actually resulted in criminal charges, prosecution, or conviction. And the term crime, so let's go to page 13. The crime of violence motivated by gender means a crime of violence committed because of gender or on the basis of gender, and due, at least in part, to an animus based on the victim's gender. So I guess it's a crime of gender as well, they're saying, because it's male committing an alleged crime, it's allegedly, on a female. Item 56, defendant, Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated enabled defendant's commission of the crime of violence motivated by gender and is therefore also liable under the VGM VPL. So I guess they're saying that this alleged criminal act was motivated by gender because the defendant is seeking to commit this crime against the opposite gender, male assaulting female. So different genders as a direct and proximate result of the aforementioned crime of violence and gender-motivated violence, plaintiff has sustained and will continue to sustain monetary damages, right? So monetary damages, this is a civil lawsuit, not a criminal action. This is a civil lawsuit, although there are criminal allegations, I would say, in this lawsuit. So I assume that, if a criminal case would be brought, then that would be, there would be a separate, there would definitely be separate proceedings, because in other words, and then if this goes to trial, they could also have, Sean Puppy Combs could, I assume he can also take this, if he doesn't settle, he can also take this to trial, and then, different evidence, all the evidence will have to come out through the discovery phase, and then, like I said, with a criminal, so civil, you can have a civil trial or you can have a criminal trial. So, but if it doesn't, if they don't settle out of court, then they may end up in trial. So we have to see how things are going to work out in this lawsuit. So let's go to item 58. The above described conduct of defendants constitutes a offense as defined in Article 130 of the New York Penal Law. So the New York Penal Law. So a lot of times, I think it's a good idea for us to, as citizens of the United States, I've always wanted to, read up on some previous cases, some precedent cases, cases that are similar. So precedent cases cases that relate to a certain case that you may be trying to solve. As a lawyer, you want a precedent cases, those important cases. Because I know I did take a course down Strayer University, business law. Took a business law course down there, and we learned about precedent cases, and we went over certain cases and analyzed. We went over the cases that were already solved, for the course assignments, cases that were already solved. And so we, teacher wanted us to go in there and analyze some cases. And, you read the case, you see how they solved it, and then, you analyze it yourself and see why you think they might have came up with, the outcome that they came up with for that particular case. So those precedent cases, so in other words, in this lawsuit, I noticed that they did mention the previous lawsuits, like the Cassandra Ventura, Sean Puppy Combs, and then I think it was another lawsuit, Miss Dickerson versus Sean Puppy Combs as well. So to me, those would be almost could be considered as precedent cases where they can. I noticed that they mentioned those in this lawsuit. So those to me could also be considered as precedent cases, model cases to follow, similar cases, similar cases that had a certain outcome. So precedent cases, those important cases, those model cases to follow. So I know in my business law course we talked about, so I was at Strayer University, so I did get my bachelor's in business administration. So I took some law, I took one law class, business law, and then I took, accounting courses, business courses, computer courses. So in other words, in my business law class, we learned about different terms, stare decisis, let the decision stand. So stare decisis, that has a lot to do with the precedent cases, not precedent, precedent, let the stare decisis, let the decision stand. In other words, when judges went down in the towns and they solved those cases, and the outcomes of those cases became law. They became law. So that's what they're talking about, stare decisis, let the decision stand. So the judges went down in the towns and they solved cases, and then when they made a decision, those decisions were put, into law. They made law. That's why they say judges make law. Congress make law, judges make law. So that is what precedent means. So let me get on with this lawsuit. Praying for relief. Wherefore, plaintiff prays judgment be entered in her favor against defendants, and each of them as follows: for a money judgment representing compensatory damages, including consequential damages, lost wages, earning, and all other sums of money together with interest on these amounts according to proof. For a money judgment for mental pain and anguish and severe emotional distress according to proof. For punitive and exemplary damages according to proof. So in other words, compensatory damages is what the plaintiff is seeking. Compensatory damages, damages that will compensate the plaintiff. And punitive damages. Punitive damages will punish. Punitive damages and exemplary damages according to proof. So punitive damages, so she's seeking to punish the defendants. So make it plural, defendants, because I think it was three defendants named. It says for attorney's fees, costs, for prejudice or prejudgment and post-judgment interest, and for such other and further relief as the court may deem just and proper. So this is the last page. So this says it was dated December 6, 2023. Although they said I think the last day was November. Was it November 24th? I think it was November the 24th. They said that was the last day, but I guess they still are able to file. So I think it was said that no matter how long ago that it had been since this alleged event, this assault happened, then a person could still file. I think November 24th was the last date, but it seems like other cases are still coming out. So like I said, this also can be used as a precedent. This could be used as a precedent case. Also, this could be used as one too. But the previous lawsuits, like Cassie Ventura, Cassandra Ventura versus Sean Puffy Combs, that could be used as a precedent case. That would be a model case, a model lawsuit, I guess I would say, to follow, according to this one, because these lawsuits seem similar. They seem similar. So the Cassandra Ventura versus Sean Puffy Combs, so that lawsuit was settled, and that could be used as a precedent case, a model case to follow. So, in other words, then also, like I said, stare decisis. We learned that term too. We also learned actus reus, mens rea. Actus rea means you carried out a criminal act. Actus rea. And then mens rea. Mens rea is like in your mind. You're thinking about committing a crime, but you hadn't committed a crime yet. So that would be, it's kind of like a mental state of mind. In other words, you're thinking about, maybe I'll go rob this bank. You're thinking about it. But when you actually go rob the bank, actus rea. So, just those are just a few terms. But I am also presently taking a couple other law courses with Coursera.org. So check them out. They have free courses over there, law classes, all kind of classes, free. And you have the lectures and everything is online. Or you can have, also when you finish, you can pay for a certificate for that particular course. And certificates are less than $100. So, you can get a certificate when you finish the course. Or you can just take it free, take the test, and just, keep the knowledge in your brain. Or you can also apply for a degree, Coursera.org. So, but I did attend Strayer University. I did get my bachelor's in business administration, my master's in information systems. So I am also interested in law. So that's why a lot of my content, law and business and accounting. So if you check out my page, so like this video, subscribe to my channel, and so comment on some of my content. If you feel like, you feel like you want to give me some ideas of other topics that I can talk about on my channel, other videos that I can create. So I just try to build my channel, not thinking about my subscribers at this time. But I mean, you want to get your subscribers up, but I have to put that on the back burner, and just my concentration now is just on creating educational content, enlightening content, empowering content that we can learn from. You know how you're dealing where you working for an organization. You're working for an organization, and you're creating you want to create learning content in your organization. You want to learn from your coworkers. You want them to learn from you. You're creating a learning organization. So it's just so much when it comes to business. Business is so wide. It's like widespread. I mean, it's broad. I want to say broad. Business is a broad term. When you think of business, there's so many layers when it comes to business. I mean, you have international business, global business. You can talk about marketing, advertising, promoting, branding. You can talk about how to build a brand. You can talk about, you can show somebody how to. You can create videos on how to, start a business. How to get the proper business licenses. How to name your business. What name should you give your business? It's so many things when it comes to business. I mean, then trademarking. Trademarking your business name, business products. It's just so much, when it comes to business. So I do have a video. I have some videos that I do talk about starting a business. Uh, you know, starting a business, running a business. Choosing the name, labels, logos, your packaging. On that sense, and then you can jump over. It's just so much when it comes to business. So I just know that me choosing to create my content around business, I would have a lot of content that I can bring into my videos. Because when you're talking about business, you're talking about everything. Now, look, I did talk about also artificial intelligence, blockchain technology. I talk about, I did talk about those topics on my channel. And I talked about virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, so I do have videos on those as well. So and then I want to get more into those as well too. So so augmented reality, virtual reality. So in virtual reality, how you put those headsets on, you purchase those headsets, and you will become immersed in a different environment. There's virtual reality, we have augmented reality, mixed reality. So mixed means all the realities mixed together. But so I want to bring more videos on that too, so I can learn more. I want to learn more about those topics. And then I have artificial intelligence, then machine learning, deep learning. So machine learning, you have the self-driving cars. Tesla came up with those self-driving cars. So in other words, machine learning, training these machines, teaching these machines how to do things like humans, how to mimic a human. So in other words, they try to mimic the human brain, trying to mimic our brain, and they're trying to train these digital devices, these 0 and 1 devices, machine learning, deep learning. So I'm learning more about that as well. So, because actually, I also am taking a class over there. So Coursera.org, they have those courses over there too. I think I was taking a course called AI for Everyone. So I finished that course. So I did finish that course, AI for Everyone, and then a couple of law classes I'm taking. I think it's the name of the course. One of the courses was I think it was international law. Yeah, one of those courses was international law, and those are free. So I signed up for the free classes first. So so international law, and the other one was American law. So they're two different courses. So I learned a lot in both of those classes. So I invite you to go over to Coursera.org. COURSERA.org. So check them out. So, but just wanted to go over this lawsuit. Wanted to see what was in it. So just wanted to see what was in this lawsuit. So the United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Jane Doe, the plaintiff, and we have defendants Sean Combs, Harve, Pierre. The third assailant is Daddy's House Recordings Incorporated and Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated. So this, like I said, is a civil lawsuit where the plaintiff is seeking money damages. So right now these are just allegations, and we want to see how things are going to turn out. We don't know if it's going to be settled. Excuse me. We don't know if it's going to be settled out of court or it's going to trial, going to a civil trial. So, like I said, in the United States of America, we are innocent until proven guilty. So I am going to end this video at this time. And I want to say thanks for joining me. Glad to see you. Glad you can be here. Shirley TV. So like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Yes. So I will be bringing you more lawsuits, contracts. So these, this is all business. Like I said, my content is centered around business. So lawsuits like this is a contract, So, you know, we talked about contracts in my course too, my business law class, now Strayer University, yes. Yes, I was down there for 6 years doing my master's, doing my master's in information systems and my bachelor's in business administration. So, you know, Shirley TV, and we out.